reaching the evolutionary plateau. About 445 million years, a species that is virtually unevolved. At some point in its history, it did evolve, and there's probably some elements of microevolution or just basically natural selection that may vary by region. But generally, as a whole, there is basically pretty much no macroevolution being observed for over 445 million years as it relates to this particular species. So in theory, you got all these species that are evolving, but you look at this horseshoe crab, it's reached its plateau. Just as we have reached our plateau in the whole photo and videography thing. Like we're gonna discuss later, you dump $1 trillion on someone like ourselves with no, you know, this the talent. Basically you see these people, they got these similar equipment and they're able to capture all these quality images of Mars. But you know what? We're very happy with that because we don't need to capture the planet ourselves, because we can just watch someone else's video and behold the great work they have done and just admire that in awe. So we're very happy. But there's a misunderstanding about evolution. So people think it's about macroevolution works in terms of the common ancestry, the common ancestor. So the human being didn't evolve from chimpanzee, and no chimpanzee evolved from a human being, or humans from bonobos, or great apes from humans, humans from great apes. They never evolved from one another. So somewhere down the line, they're going to be sharing a common ancestor. So just like domesticate a dog. A lot of people have this idea the dog evolved from the gray wolf, the modern wolf. But actually the dog was domesticated from basically a prehistoric wolf that's probably now extinct. So even among wolves and dogs, so the modern wolf and the dog closely related, but they don't they didn't really evolve from one another. They not even through selective breeding. So a lot of misconceptions about evolution but the human beings didn't come from great apes didn't come from human beings, and they didn't evolve from horseshoe crabs, and basically these horseshoe crabs stopped evolving just like ourselves. So briefly, a scientific reflection. One of the key concepts is a community working together around, even across different parts of the world, striving to expand the scientific body of knowledge. And we look at the great astrophotography and astronomy of regular folks, regular Joes in their backyard. They got beautiful pictures of not just the low-hanging fruit of the moon, they got beautiful images of Mars, Saturn, Jupiter, using similar equipment. So if we don't have the skills, even if we got the right equipment, but not everything is entirely experiential. We look at the great works that other people, very talented people, have done. We admire the work that they have done, even as we try to film a planet for ourselves. But it's incredible to know that you got these talented people. They gaze up at the star. They point their equipment. Some more complicated. We don't know how to operate the equipment. Even if we had the mechanical or remote controlled or the apps, there's some type of configuration. If we had that expensive equipment, we won't even know how to operate it. We're not competent to even operate it, so we're not gonna. It would be a waste of money, to give us that equipment. But it's amazing to look at the work others have done, admire what they have done, and vicariously understand that, wow, these planets are real, even as we try to capture it for ourselves. But we want to get to another topic. Evolution isn't a religion. Some people have remarked maybe evolution is like a religion, but it's not, because one of the greatest strengths of science is that there's an emerging consensus. A consensus is not a doctrine written in law, and sometimes you might hear criticism of evolution. For example, for conjecture, 100 years ago they believed in this. That was their consensus. But a fundamental pillar of that consensus has changed. But that's the way science works. There's no doctrines to defend. A consensus can be changed as new evidence emerges. So for example, let's just say evolution ain't a religion. So let's just say there's a main consensus that human origins. We don't want to get into all all the academics, all the more nerdy biology stuff. They had taxonomic classification, but then later on there's new emphasis, new perhaps different ways of looking at classification in terms of cladistics and genomics. So a lot of basically in the old days people spend time in a biology. They're going to be familiar with whatchamacallit, kingdom, phylum, class. I'm trying to remember it just off the top of our minds. It was kingdom, phylum, class, order, genus, species. But there's different frameworks, there's different emphasis. So say there's a consensus right now. Human origins. Most scientists are agreed that there's an emergence out of Africa. But say a radical new scientist, they find some type of transitionary fossils. For example, in Northeast Asia, they find it in in Europe, the Caucasus Mountains. We're just making it up. So if there's new evidence, a lot of times there's a new emergent school of thought that challenges the pre-existing orthodoxy. And given the arguments based on evidence, so the camp that says human origins out of Africa, that's not a doctrine. Or the camp that says, basically, that believes there's emergent evidence for emergence out of Europe or Asia, however, basically based on the evidence, the consensus does change over time based on new findings of science. So there's never this orthodoxy where, for example, a new researcher. So it's not a religion. So generally, in most religious contexts, someone has a new interpretation. For example, there's different, basically different ideas. For example, let's just take Christianity. Latter-day Saints might have basically an interpretation that could be different than the evangelical interpretation, or evangelical interpretation may be different than Catholic interpretation. But generally, when a new prophet comes out and says, we have either restored revelation, new revelation, there's basically a body of doctrine. Basically they go head on, they collide with a existing power structure. But the scientific debate as it relates to macroevolution isn't like that. So let's just say you discover a pair of fossils in Eurasia that contradicts the existing school. That school is not going to say, hey, you're a heretic. There's already a consensus because Darwin said, Darwin back in, whatever, he said this, he said that. That's our consensus. Whenever the new evidence emerges, based on evidence, consensus changes. Evolution is not a body of, it's not religious doctrine. This is not a doctrine to defend. There's new emergent trends in science, and that's what makes science dynamic, is that anyone can find a fossil. They can find a fossil, they can publish a paper, and if the evidence supports a new consensus, then there is a changing there's a changing consensus. Does that make sense? You know what? Well, we're gonna try to get the thing with the planet, but basically, you can put billion-dollar equipment, on someone with no talent like ourselves, and that's just going to be useless. So we're going to tweak around with the little hand crank. But if that hand crank and tripod, all that, yeah, after a while, we just got to throw in the towel.